What's up, guys? Okay, I'm really excited to announce that today's adult beverage supplier is Jing-A Brewery. Jing-A was founded in Beijing by longtime friends Chris and Alex. These two creative geniuses, with a shared passion for the fermented golden elixir of life that we call beer, are constantly hunting down rare ingredients and trying new ideas with which to create some of the best beers I have ever had. Jing-A is constantly pushing the envelope of what is possible with brewing, while at the same time celebrating its roots and changing the world's perception of Chinese beer. Let me tell you something, guys. Most people don't even realize that China, and Beijing in particular, has a vibrant and world-class craft brewing culture. But if you look just a little bit deeper, you will find that Beijing has an extremely vibrant craft brewing and taproom culture. Jing-A stands out as a leader in this field and has hands down created some of the best brews I have ever had. No doubt about it. If you are in Beijing or ever get the chance to visit, I highly recommend you visit one of their tap rooms and partake of the golden magic juice that those wizards Chris and Alex create. You will not be disappointed. I'll put the links to their website and their other details in the listed show notes. Today, I'm having their signature American IPA called Flying Fist. Flying Fist is abundantly dry hopped for a burst of tropical fruit, fresh pine, and zesty citrus, which smacks you in the mouth harder than a villain in a Shaw Brothers movie. This brew has won the bronze medal at the Asian Beer Cup in 2014 and 2015, and a bronze at the International Beer Cup in 2016. It's highly recommended. But as always, guys, remember, drink responsibly and abide by your local laws. Alright, some news for you guys. In the last month, I was featured and interviewed on two separate channels. The first channel is the channel of Monkey Steals Peach. If you recall, my last guest, Will Wayne Williams, on the Drunken Boxing podcast, he runs the YouTube channel Monkey Steals Peach, and more recently he has started a podcast endeavor. And I was interviewed by Will on that, and you may view and listen to that on his Monkey Steals Peach YouTube channel just by searching for Monkey Steals Peach. The second place that I was interviewed was on an old friend of mine, Winston. He runs a YouTube channel called Serpent ZA. That's one word, Serpent with a Z and an A at the end. And he wanted to talk to me about this whole phenomena that has been occurring over the last couple of years with these alleged Kung Fu masters being beaten up and all of that. We get into that with some interesting background information that is pertinent to understand how we got to where we are today. So you may look for that by going onto his YouTube channel, Serpent ZA, and the video is called Why Are Kung Fu Masters Being Beaten Up in China? So it's one of the more recent videos. It's an interesting discussion, and I think there's some insights in both of these, both the interview with Will as well as with Winston, that are I would think that most martial artists would find quite interesting. Once again, I appreciate any and all support for both the Drunken Boxing podcast as well as the Mushin martial culture YouTube channel and all the endeavors that I do through my Patreon. We have a Patreon. It's been set up just for a couple of months. If you enjoy these endeavors, want to assist me and support me in continuing to do both the podcast and whatever else we release on the Mushin Martial Culture YouTube channel, pop on over to the Patreon page and you can pledge what you can pledge there. There's a couple of tiers. The Patreon page is, you can find it at patreon.com/Mushin Martial Culture. The links are in the show notes. And once again, I appreciate any and all support. Today's guest is Jarek Szymanski, who originally hails from Poland. Jarek is a pioneering legend within Chinese martial arts, particularly within the styles of Xingyi and Xingyi Quan, Bagua Zhang, and Taiji Quan, as he was one of the early Westerners to come into the heart of China and study these arts at a time when the reality of the martial arts environment in the northern part of China was relatively unknown to the outside world. He arrived in China in 1990 in what was meant to be a one-year stint, which then turned into a lifelong endeavor that has lasted for the last 30 years. From the time Jarek arrived in China, he had the ambition to seek out the true practitioners of these arts and study from them deeply. Being fluent in the Chinese language and studying these arts from those early years gave Jarek an insight into practices and practitioners that were not exposed to the West, and many of whom are no longer with us. Being a passionate researcher, Jarek documented practices and practitioners and shared these to the West with his groundbreaking website, ChinFromInside. This website gave insights into these arts that had never been so accessible in both the West or in the English language, and I personally devoured all that he posted on his website over the years, which includes interviews, translations, and general insights into these special arts, and so did many other practitioners around the world. He opened a window into the Chinese martial arts that had not been available before. Apart from this, he has practiced these arts deeply in various places in China, including Beijing and Shanghai, where he currently resides. Jarek was a student of the late and great Xinyi Quan master Li Zunsi as well. This discussion was very insightful, and I hope to have a follow-up interview in the future with him. I was also happy to hear from Jarek that he is updating his China from Inside website, and he has also started a YouTube channel which will feature some of his extremely valuable footage, which he will slowly populate as time goes on. The links to both his website and YouTube channel are in the show notes. Well, let's get into it. Here is Jarek Szymanski. Okay, welcome Jarek. I'm honored to have you on this podcast. We've been working for a while to try get this to happen with all these situations that are happening both in China and now worldwide. We managed to get it set up. So welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. I'm happy to be here as well. You actually promised that we have beer together, that we can meet for a drink and talk, and that's why. And I was not very happy to do it over WeChat because, promise is a promise. But anyway, well.
We will still do the beer. Don't worry. That will still happen. But I thought, why not use our isolation time for something interesting and productive and try to get this podcast recorded.
Yeah, I guess, this whole conversation is possible also because finally both of us have time and nothing better to do than just meet and discuss things that we like.
Well, on that note, maybe we can start talking about the passion that we both share, which is martial arts, and maybe I could ask you to give me a bit of background of your origins, what got you started, how it was in the beginning for you, etc. With martial arts.
No, it's a long story, I'm an old fart, so there are many years to talk about. But everything started, I guess. It was 1970s. I was a teenager. There was this program on TV. And I was, for the first time, I saw people doing karate, breaking boards, and showing all these movements. And there were some movies. This famous, character Kato or Kato, whatever his name was.
Right.
This guy who was attacking, I think, Inspector Clouseau in all those French movies. So there were some. These were TV characters. And then, of course, Bruce Lee and his Enter the Dragon. That was like it was a breakthrough for me. I mean, before that, I was sold to karate, and then I decided, wow, this is the real deal. And I saw that movie. I don't know how many times.
Yeah.
I was never tired of watching it.
I'm still not tired of watching it. I watched it last week. I love that movie.
Yeah. This is again going back, along the memory lane and then remembering all those great moments in our life that actually changed our life.
Yeah.
So this is, I guess, everybody started like that, and then there was looking for schools, and then I found a karate school which was called the freestyle karate, which was basically based on Kyokushinkai karate.
Oh, really?
This guy who was running the school, the head coach, from what I've heard, he was working at a steel mill, and he was one of those workers there.
Wow.
Extremely powerful, because everything that because of his job. It's like all those when we talk about Chinese martial arts and then how people practice, and then we forget often that what they do for living.
Yeah.
And we can even, I would put a thesis that Chinese martial arts are what they are right now because there are hardly people busy with manual work and labor.
Yes.
Most are doing business. They practice martial arts as perhaps even in a similar fashion as those 100 years ago. But those people back then spent long, hours every day working in the fields or doing a lot of physical work.
Yes.
So they had, so if we cut off this from if we don't consider that part of their life as a integral part of practice, then we get what we get.
Yes.
People don't practice really hard. That's the problem.
Right. So when you said you started with this guy who was doing Kyokushin,
and we had this big brother who was our Soviet Union was the main country behind all this East European bloc of countries.
Yes.
And we were dependent politically and economically, but still existing as independent country.
Right.
So yes, Poland was saying communist. We never had actually a communist party. We had a workers' party, United Workers' Party. So the word didn't really. It was not very popular in Poland for all those years when we were dependent on Soviet Union.
Right.
So Poland was always, going a little bit its own way. But yes, indeed, back then karate was very popular in the 70s. I think it came. It was like interesting because karate was back then very popular in France, in Netherlands. There were some really good teachers and people in Poland also. Some of those guys had opportunity, which was not very common actually, going abroad to those Western countries and learning karate there. So this guy, my suspicion is that we got some books. There was this guy. I think his name was Haber-Zetzer or something like that.
Okay.
He was a French guy who released a really thick encyclopedia of karate, and I guess that culture. He just he was powerful, because of his work, and then he just picked up some movements from the book, and karate was so popular. Nobody was really checking the background of the teacher. You just saw the poster.
Well, you couldn't Google. You couldn't Google it back then, so it was quite hard to check.
Obviously, yes, absolutely. There was scammers' paradise back then.
Yeah. But this is actually that's why I mentioned these. I'm what I was referring to was actually the communist, and I remember a lot of the communist countries' martial arts were somewhat prohibited. Was this the situation in Poland too at that time?
Actually, I'm not really aware of that. Perhaps some of them were. I remember there was another guy, who was an officer, as we learned later, like public security bureau in Poland.
Okay.
Officer, and he established his own school and called it tsunami. This big wave that comes to Japan after earthquakes.
Yes.
So anyway, he had his own school, and he was actually trying to delegalize all other schools, saying that they promote some values that are not actually in line with with original ideas and so on. He was not a political way, but he had his political power.
Right.
Anyway, so. But no, I'm not really aware if any kind of martial arts were really
restricted. Okay, that's good.
No.
So you went in and you started doing Kyokushin, and how long did you do that for before you decided to move on to something else?
Well, first, as I mentioned, I started with this freestyle karate, and then official Kyokushinkai karate school was open in my town.
Mm-hmm.
So I switched to that, and that was I think it was more. It was not that really free style stuff. That was more in line with what Japanese teachers were teaching.
Okay.
And then I was about 18, and I saw another. I think I took a part in a lecture. There was a lecture by this guy who was promoting Chinese culture in our town. Mainly mainly he was talking about Taoist classics and so on. And obviously, I was very much interested in that, in Taoism, Buddhism, and Far Eastern philosophies. And he also mentioned during the lecture that there's a possibility to study Taiji Quan.
Okay.
If there's a group of people big enough to cover the costs of the teacher who was in Warsaw, capital city, 300 kilometers from the town I was living in. And this is how it began. And then I was studying Taiji and Kung Fu, as we were referring to all those not faster and not that soft styles that he was actually also teaching. As I learned later, what we were studying was the teacher of the teacher of my teacher was from Vietnam. He was a student who came from Vietnam to Poland to study in Poland, and he was teaching some. I guess some of his family arts as well, but then he apparently had an access to some books on Chinese wushu. So we had a lot of like a mixture of different routines from Nanquan, Chaquan, and all this stuff. But Jibengong, like the basic stuff was I believe it was like a Vietnamese local martial arts that I don't really know the name of. So that was I was studying before I had access before I saw praying mantis. That was we had this because martial arts at that time were big in Poland, and there were some dedicated magazines. There was information about competition regarding knowledge. How much you know about Chinese martial arts. And I answered some questions, sent a letter. They accepted me and allowed me to take part in the finals in Warsaw. And I went to Warsaw, and there was a wushu demonstration of different Chinese martial arts schools that were at that time taught in Warsaw. And I saw praying mantis, and I was extremely impressed. And I switched to praying mantis. I really liked.
Do you remember what kind of mantis it was?
7-star praying mantis. 7-star from Hong Kong via, I don't remember the Chinese, I think his name was Li Jinrong. Li Jinrong. 八端锦的锦 and 荣华的荣. There was a teacher. This guy was. I think he's more better known as Li Kam Wing.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if it was Li Kam Wing.
Exactly. But well, of course, it was not just. He was not the one who was teaching in Poland. He had a disciple, Kai Uwe Pell from Germany, who spent many years in Hong Kong studying with him, and then he was teaching in Poland. He was teaching in Warsaw, and my teacher was Sławek Milczarek, who was Uwe Pell's disciple in Warsaw, was running the school. Sławek later on changed. He wanted to study the most original style of 7-star praying mantis. I think that was his idea. That he wanted how the style is practiced at its roots in Shandong. He was lucky. He met a very good teacher there, Yu Tianchang. So they. But anyway, this is a story that was. I was already in China at the time.
At
I
that
didn't
point.
study. Yes.
When
So
I
anyway,
was
I was
when I
studying this.
was in Poland, because we had the second World Taiji Chuan Championships there, so I went quite a few times, and we also had some international coaches course that I was teaching at there many years ago, maybe. Well, not many, but like it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. These things, I remember meeting some people through the federation there, and there was an older gentleman who was a 7-star teacher and practitioner there. I don't remember his name, but maybe he's related to the same school or the group that you were part of. I'll try to remember his name and let you know. But he wasn't young. I mean, I think maybe he was close to 70. So, yeah.
Uh, well, it's probably Slavik. I guess it's him. I don't think he had any students who were older than he was.
Right.
So one teaching and then I guess it was him.
Okay.
It was him. I think Slavik is in his late 60s or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we had some beer together, actually.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I thought that, you are for the real deal. You are for Slimovica more than the beer. Well.
Yeah. We just met the one night, and he came to. It was very nice. He's a very quiet gentleman, but a nice guy. Yeah. So you went on. I mean, you were doing 7-star Mantis, and was this something you enjoyed as you did it, or did you find that you wanted to look for something else while you were doing that?
Once I enjoyed it. I was very happy to study it. I liked it because it was a complete system. It was unlike the stuff that I was learning before. It was not like a random of different routines. It was rather a system. As I learned later, it was actually a system that was enriched by routines from Jimu school and perhaps some other styles. Li Kan-wing was teaching a lot of routines, and that was but at the same time there were a lot of exercise with partner. There were praying mantis basic routine, basic exercises, fundamental methods, and yeah, well, I really liked it. I was actually even teaching it in Poznan later on.
Really? Wow.
I studied for a couple of. Yeah, I had a quite a successful school at that time. We had like, it was there was no internet yet. Yeah, so people didn't have to much of entertainment, and martial arts were still very popular. So. When I opened the school, there were like 170 or 180 people
who
wanted
great.
to enroll and study. Yeah, I just, I didn't have that capacity. The place, the gym couldn't meet the number of potential students. So I just, those who came first were served first, and then. But yeah, it was there were a lot of people. But time, it's there's another matter that is, I think, important for martial arts is being able to keep it and practice it for years.
Yes,
many people studied, are really happy and enthusiastic at the beginning. And then, they grow up, they get older, they get families, they have children, and, gradually life grinds them, and makes them, well, there are priorities in life, and what was once the main and most important thing becomes one of many, and less important, and then they give up, and those who have been able to keep on practicing and for many years, there are not too many of them. And that's another, all those people who say, well, in Chinese martial arts, there are so few people who are very good and so on. Well, it's a matter of time. Unfortunately, there's no short. There's no. You have to invest time. Of course, you can invest that much time in 5 years. That some other people will need 20 years
Right.
yeah. So it's not exactly fair to say that the longer you practice, the better you get, unless you practice well and hard. But still, not many people are able to keep on practicing and be faithful to their interest
Yeah.
for their whole life.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing that my teacher told me because he's a big fan, or he's a researcher, and he very much likes Shoubei Lu. That old Ming Dynasty manual written by Wushu. And if I recall, the
Yeah,
quote is from Shoubei Lu that Wushu said, and this is another aspect going on to what you were saying about people that can continue for a long time, and differences even between those people. Wushu said that learning, I think it was spear, because the manual has got a big section on spear. He said that learning spear is for clever people, for clever martial artists, not for stupid martial artists. Stupid martial artists can go learn Chui or axe. and when my teacher told me that this is a quote from there, I remember thinking, actually, if we apply that in general to martial arts, it's not all people that have an aptitude to practice martial arts well. And it doesn't mean that everyone that's practicing martial arts is of the same level of intelligence. So some people, like you said, in 5 years train very hard. That's an effort issue. But also some people are just naturally going to excel more than others too. So that's why we have such a varying degree of competence within martial arts, irrespective of people training longer or shorter. Some people can train longer and just, well, unfortunately, not have the aptitude of some people that maybe train shorter. So it's just the reality of martial arts. So yeah.
well, exactly. I think it's many of us are. Well, I think Confucius said that when you hit 50, you basically realize what is your goal in life and what your abilities are, and you know your and so on. But when you are 20, when you are a teenager, you think the whole world belongs to you. You can do whatever you want, and you do not. That's unfortunately, sometimes you don't have those talents. You don't have those. I would say even the character to do certain things in the way they are supposed to be done, and we see it in everywhere. Yeah, there's well, people study whatever. They study languages, and out of the class there are some who are very good, and then the rest is just average.
Yeah.
Well, question or the question in Chinese martial arts is that being average does not necessarily mean that you are good enough to use them as they were supposed to be used.
Yes.
Sometimes if you have to have certain talents to be able to reach the level that this martial art was actually designed to function.
Right.
I mean, if in Taiji, so many people practice, and then they say, well, in Taiji you should be able to fight. Anyway, there is the general concept that you should, after 3 months, you should be able doing some fighting and being able to defend yourself. And so, this is not. Unfortunately, these are martial arts. These are not military arts.
Right.
Yeah, the military arts where any soldier, anybody, has to be able to learn how to fight in a shortest possible time,
and in a basic way too.
While
in a basic manner, at
exactly,
least. Yes.
Exactly. Like with Chinese martial arts, it's a different path. They are not sports. They are not military arts. They were developed in certain times that the roots are usually in military arts.
Yes.
In those. on whatever battlefields and so on, and some of those martial arts retain those features. But over the time, 19th century, opium arrives in China. Everybody, many people, those who can afford, they smoke opium, and they whatever they do is, of course, influenced by that habit.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we have internal martial arts being born out of all of a sudden everybody's well, this is not a whole truth. This is like half truth. With Tai Chi, we can probably trace it to those poor rural communities where perhaps opium was not that popular, and we see those communities fighting with whatever they were practicing at the time successfully against bandits and organized rebels. Like in case of Zhenjiagou, we have records of Zhenjiagou people fighting with long poles against Mianjin, which was like the northern part of the rebellion army that was cooperating with Taipings.
Yes.
Taipings basically the Yangtze, but Mianjins were trying to do the same job in northern China.
Right.
This is the time when Xingyi actually was also, I would say it was born that time also to protect the villages against those bandits. And we don't know how the original Xingyi was taught. We don't know how Taiji back in the 60s or 50s, 60s of 19th century was taught. We can only imagine that it was probably different than nowadays.
Yes, for sure.
I would say.
For sure, I'm sure. I mean, it has to have been. Even just looking at what we can look at from video footage, if you go back to older video footage of all of these arts, and you see some people practicing compared to today, there's a difference in character, at least. I wouldn't say there's so much of a difference in technique, but there's definitely a very clear difference in character, and that's not so long ago compared to what periods you're talking about. So it's interesting.
I think it's martial arts, the history of Chinese martial arts, and the way they were taught in different periods of time is very much connected to, of course, the general history of China. When like a social unrest and if the state was not able to protect people, busy with whatever they were busy at the time, people had to protect themselves, and martial arts were the tool to develop it. And I guess there was like militia. Militia was not everybody was practicing, but few were able to really use it, and right. they were the core of the local militia, those groups of people able to protect the villages or the villages. And then Zhenjiagou, I think, is a good example of that. I still have this. There was like. I think it was an important discovery that finally, in official documents, we were able to find the proof that back in 1860s, those people in Zhenjiagou were able to fight. And what was really interesting, fighting with Taiji, they were fighting with long poles. Yeah. And we know now that what the weapon that Cheng described in his book, in one of the manuscripts that he wrote in the early 20th century, was a long spear, which was actually a spear from Wangbao village. We know that people from Zhenjiagou were actually using a weapon that was. Of course, this is like 60 years of difference. We talk about Ninjin, which is 50s, 60s of 19th century, and then we talk about Cheng's writings, which are like the 1920s.
Right.
So there's a difference, but he was very apparently the Wang Bao spear was very popular very popular. It was known and respected weapon among Chen clan. And when we look at Chiang Nai-zhou, who created his own martial art,
right,
one of those 4 or 5 styles of Henan in Henan,
yeah,
along with Shaolin. Yes, we have Shaolin, Xin Youhe, we have Taiji, and we have Changjia Quan.
And of course.
Yes, and so Changjia Quan actually has many weapons also from Wang Bao spear. The spear was very famous. So, perhaps at the time, the empty hand techniques were not that much pronounced in the countryside, not as much as the weapons.
Right.
The weapons were more important. And this is another aspect. Now, we see weapons right now to be interesting, way of playing with with martial art.
Right.
Something nice. We practice them because it's part of the system. It's nice. It's impressive when you hold the weapon in flash routine. But I guess back in those earlier years, weapons were much more important than empty hand techniques, and we see it, even in those when we see photos of Chinese soldiers in 1930s fighting against with Japanese troops. There was this using the sabers.
Right.
Obviously the sabers were important for the military, and they were the teachers were doing traditional martial arts. So, the question that begs to be asked is, what was the real in terms of time invested in practice? How much were weapons practiced? How important they were compared to empty hand routines?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
And then, and then we go back to Qi Jiguang's writings, who considered boxing like a less important part of practice,
right?
In general.
Yes, completely. He even, the later version of his book, he removed the barehanded sections, the chapters about barehanded practice, and he probably thought it was a good tool for keeping soldiers. Training some physicality and some dexterity and things, but in terms of combat, it was obviously far inferior to weapons. So, for obvious reasons.
But like when we look at this process, it's a process. We talk about military arts and
right.
Martial arts that we practice. Then we look at weapons and the importance of weapon practice, and we see this deteriorating as well, becoming less important. So, of course, we see this is also change of the society from the society constant fight for survival or self-protection, to the society which lives in peaceful times, where weapons are not only not necessary but also often forbidden,
outlawed. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So it's because always there's this question about how effective Chinese martial arts can be and are. It depends what we are. Is this about? Are we talking about lay type competitions? Sports competitions, battlefield. Street fighting. These are completely different environments and different situations. And our Chinese martial arts, which is the perfect place to display skills of Chinese martial arts? That's another question. Because this is you practice for a certain reason, for a certain situation, for certain environment. If you are a soldier, this is the fight for your life. So you practice differently. For Chinese martial arts right now, well, I don't think people think about fighting for life or for more than, getting more students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is also people today, they talk very much about self-defense, but they don't talk about life defense. Although you could say that they're the same things, but most people understand in civilized Western societies today, that when you get into an altercation with somebody, it's not, I mean, I come from South Africa, so when you get into a situation there, it's usually something to do with your life. But in general, Western societies are some disagreement with somebody and having some sort of an altercation. They're not thinking immediately that this guy is trying to kill me and I've got to kill him so he doesn't kill me. They think about self-defense in like, this boy at school hit my son and he didn't know how to defend himself, or this guy in the highway had a road rage incident and I got out of the car and we had a fight. They don't really, it's not, although those can be life and death situations, we don't think like that, actually. That's the truth. We don't, in general today, we're not thinking of combat in those lines. Even professional sports fighters aren't thinking about that. I'm not saying that they are ill-equipped for that. I'm just saying in terms of mentality, they're not thinking about that.
I think this is a really important point that you've just made. I remember a friend of mine telling me about one of the teachers in Shanghai, and he said, like in a low voice, this guy killed somebody back in when he was younger, and he said, that friend of mine was Japanese, and his idea was that once you kill somebody, your mindset changes.
Right.
Your mentality changes. Your approach to martial arts changes. I'm not talking that, you have to kill somebody to be a skillful fighter.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is a big no. But I guess it's a fact and something that we cannot deny, that this changes a person. And this works, soldiers are the best example of that. There's animal in any of us, but it's to unleash it, you have to pay a high price.
Yes.
So, sometimes maybe it's better just to realize, our own limitations and what we are able to, how far are we willing to go on this path to develop certain skills.
Yeah.
I think, it's better just to be happy and practice them as we like and have fun, and instead of trying to prove that, we are the best, fighters, whatever.
Yeah.
There's high pay for that, and I don't wish anybody to go this way.
But you also said something earlier that, Chinese martial arts has so much weapon practice. So in today's world, if we are going to try prove that Chinese martial arts is a combat now, bare hand aside, we could only focus on bare hand. We cannot sit and in today's environment, there's not much avenues for you to try prove how effective you are at the use of a weapon. This doesn't exist actually today. So even if you wanted to prove that, or you wanted to develop or showcase or promote the combat effectiveness of Chinese martial arts, you really only have an avenue with bare hand today. It's not like some teacher can come out and say, I taught my student really well. A mugger tried to rob him the other day and he cut his arm off with his broadsword that he was carrying. It's not going to happen, or he got attacked by a guy with a spear and he survived. You don't really have an avenue for that anymore. We don't. But that being said, I find that we still can't. You can practice for the reasons that each person chooses, but we should also be sure that the method that is, well, I can't say we should be sure, but it should be somewhat important that methods are taught correctly, with the correct original intention as they were taught to them, their teachers, etc. So otherwise everything changes, and then we for me, I'm a person who's very much clear on definitions. For me, definitions are very important, and like Confucius said, titles matter. If you call something, the name is as important because it gives a reality to the idea of what that thing is. So names are important, definitions for me are important, and well, if it's Taiji, it should be Taiji. And we can break up definitions in a multitude of ways. And I'm saying this purely because of the direction that a lot of sport Chinese martial arts has gone, which is, in my opinion, and from my background in the work, unfortunately, it's gone very far down a road that I can't fully agree with. Unfortunately, that's just my opinion. I'm not saying that other people should now go out and engage in regular combat. I'm saying that there's ways to keep things at least within some sort of parameter, so it has some semblance of the martial route that it comes from. So yeah.
Of course, I agree, but you've been living in China for so many years, and you know perfectly how any kind of trying to keep them real would end up. You can doing some solo practice or with partner and trying to do it as well as possible and with correct intent and correct mindset. But at the end of the day, the real skill comes from doing the real thing. So if you don't fight, you only practice the methods. The methods are, you develop a certain skills, physical and mental skills. But to really be able to use this set of skills, it's like a different world. Yeah, and then you need the right social environment.
Right.
And if you don't have it, in China, of course, you will, there's no way to really test yourself in fighting. I mean, you can, you would pay a high price. I'm not talking about the foreigner fighting,
Even higher.
Like worse. You'd become, a video like that would go viral on Chinese Chinese social media, and you'd become infamous for what you've been doing. But anyway, it's true. I mean, I must be honest. To me, I'm 55. Yeah, so it's about the time to look back and verify and change the goals and. It's about a time to see your own limitations and see that you cannot change. You cannot change the society, and perhaps this is even for the better. I'm not sure if I would like to live, in times where groups of organized bandits ready to kill and rape invade my town, and I have to fight against them. And then, I would be probably, if I survived, I would be a skillful fighter. But I'm not sure if I wanna go through this.
And then develop post-traumatic stress disorder.
At best, if you survive. We live in better times. We have a lot of, we laugh what we do and are happy with that. Studying in China, perhaps this is what was actually the whole direction of development of Chinese martial arts has been about for the last 100 or more years, where people just realized that instead of focusing on just fighting and so on, we'd better focus on refining the skills, being able to use the more sophisticated skills and people, instead of talking about fighting, they were talking more about body coordination and internal processes in the body, and that lead to certain what we call Gong and other skills and listening skills and so on. I still believe that these sets were also very important back in those times of constant fights. But nowadays they became even probably more pronounced.
Yeah.
Obviously more pronounced.
Well, if you read like even
The-
old Xing classical writings, you can see that they talk about a lot of these aspects too, but they also talk heavily about the psychological aspect of practice and combat, and how important the psychological aspect was, and I mean even down. I was looking at Neigong Sijin the other day again, which is. It's so cryptic, and I'm fairly sure that it's hard even for a lot of Xingyi people to look at these four scrolls. One of them has quite a few parts, sub scrolls, but you can see that the way that they were thinking even then, and this is not alone in this pool. Other things like Cao Jiwu's 是要斋法 and what they call UFA's 九要论, etc. The psychological aspect is really important, and spoken about, and the way that they structure it even is to talk about things like the physical aspect. A physical technique can defeat a physical technique. It's reliant on it actually hitting its mark. The force aspect, the generation of force. Well, this can defeat their opponent through a feeling of your force. So big power in the right place at the right time. So that's one step above simply the technique, is the power that drives the technique. And then they will say, yes, but a spirit can defeat the opponent without even touching him. And they're not talking about mystical energy. They're talking about psychological aspects, about intimidation, and all of these very interesting parts that were important back then already too. So yeah, it's as you said, they were focusing on very many levels of martial arts, even a long time ago.
This is actually, I think, what you made a great point. This is one aspect that people often oversee and don't really pay enough attention to, the psychological aspect of fighting. Intimidation. Some say that fight is basically whether it's who wins and who loses, who is getting beaten. It's decided before even they cross hands. We are not talking about boxing matches or whatever, Sanda matches and so on. It's different, when you have rules and so on.
And periods of preparation,
But of course, you have to be physically fit and mentally tough. But there are, Li Yunsi, my senior yoga teacher, he was a poor kid from Henan province, and he didn't have wealthy parents. His parents passed away when he was young, so he was raised by his family. Then he moved when he was very young to there was a couple of years when he spent in Shaolin Temple. Then he went to Wuhan. Actually, not Wuhan. There was no Wuhan at the time. It was Hankou.
Yeah.
The most important part in on Yangtze River in the interior of China, and then he would travel to Shanghai, and he was always, it was like this. He was in this lowest part of society where rules are really kind of it's tough. It's not like being raised in a wealthy. You do your hobbies, everything you do for a hobby because you don't have to feed yourself.
Right.
Everything is being provided. He was involved in many fights, and of course he was physically very strong and he was practicing very hard and so on. But he had so many what we would call tricks, psychological tricks. Like we call them setups, whatever. But it was the set up in a ring is one thing, and set up in street fighting is a different. His most I guess the arena where he could display his skills the better, the right one was street fighting. And he knew a lot of this little movements, little
feints
of hand of absolutely, he was incredible. And then when you talk about you mentioned in the beginning of our conversation about clever people and some are too stupid to practice. Yes, spear is for clever people. There's a lot of this psychological, this skills, the set of skills and ability to change, which we like, people able to make a joke in the right moment, right joke, or the fast. This kind of the swift ability to react and in the right way, so important in martial arts as well.
Yeah.
And you see those people, you just when I was looking at my teacher, I was really amazed because he didn't have any education, but he was like a really bright man. And I'm not talking to be educated to be a bright person. I mean bright in terms of using a martial art, which of course comes from practice. And of course he had a lot of, I guess he had this inborn talent and abilities. But anyway, you have this guy who has no education, can hardly write, and he, well, hardly, and then displays so much wisdom in fighting. He shows you all those. These are not like set tricks. He just changes them in an instant. It's just we were amazed. All of us, and then you realize that part of it comes from practice. Part of it is because he was just born with those qualities.
Yes.
But a lot of it from fighting. And fighting is like integral part of any martial arts practice. And then we go back to the question, when you don't have the right environment, then you just miss an important part.
Yes.
And then you can only dream of becoming a great fighter, because there is a huge part in your practice that you will never be able to even touch, because we live in the 21st century.
Right.
And I'm not talking about the world invaded by coronavirus right now. I'm just talking about that you are missing right now. Even then, it's all different. Yeah. So.
Well, you mentioned your teacher, so that's actually an interesting point to come back to your journey, Li Zunsi. I mean, you ended up in China from Poland. How did that shift happen, and how did you end up there, and where did you end up? Was it originally Shanghai, where you are living now, or how did you get there, and what happened?
Well, there was it was kind of interesting, because I was, my father is an engineer. Then my parents decided I should be an engineer as well, because back then three professions were the ones that guaranteed a steady income. One was a doctor, another one was a priest, Catholic priest, and an engineer. So I didn't want to, because I don't want to deal with those life-threatening situations. This is a lot of stress. I didn't want to be a priest because you can get married. So well, engineer was the natural choice, and then I was studying electric engineering here in Poznań for 5 years. It was 1988, and I was doing this Tai Chi stuff and Kung Fu stuff at that time already, and praying mantis, and I was just walking with my then girlfriend, wife right now, here along the street, and we met this friend of us, and we had this casual talk, and she said, there will be sinology, the Chinese studies department opened at our university this September. And I was like, wow, I really wanted to study Chinese. Back then I did some self-study based on books that I was able to buy in the bookstore, books in Russian, by the way. We didn't have at that time any teaching materials in Polish for Chinese language. Anyway, and it was like, wow. And we met that friend. I think it was like 2 days before I was flying to France for some internship. And then so I asked my girlfriend to take my papers and send those papers to the university. I went to France for 2 months. I returned in I think it was late September, and she didn't send them. She didn't send them because she didn't think, she didn't want me to do any further studies because. No, she because I was probably spending too much time on studying instead of being with her.
Well, that's what my wife actually understood. At least she understood that I married Chinese martial arts way before I married her, so she accepts the time that I spend every day on this. But yes, sorry, carry on.
Yeah. Anyway. So I returned, and I just said, well, I have to give myself a chance at least. And I went to the university and I asked whether it's possible still to enroll, and they said, yes, we have only like I think they had only like 14 students at that time because not much was. There was not much interest in studying Chinese back in 1988. So they conditionally accepted me, and then they said, but you should actually go through a set of examinations. Whether we want to see if you if you're whatever, your English is good enough, your Polish is good enough, if you qualify. And there was this. They wanted me to take some examinations, and I visited the professor that was responsible. And, he said, well, I cannot arrange all these examinations right now because I'm on a 1 year, he took like a 1 year long
sabbatical.
Holidays, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's impossible. So I went back to the office and I said, well, in this case, we still accept you. Okay, just go and study. They were pretty relaxed about it.
Good.
And they were committed to having this department to starting it and teaching students. And after 1 year, I was studying and I loved it, and I spent a lot of time on learning what they were teaching, written, spoken Chinese, and then history of China and geography, history. I mean, when you study electric engineering, when you study, how nuclear power plants are being built and so on, it's and then Chinese about Chinese culture and so on. It was very refreshing, I must say.
Of course.
Yeah. So anyway, and after 2 years in the meantime, I graduated from that technical university in Poznan. I finished my second year of Chinese studies, and they said, well, there's an opportunity to travel to China to study the language for 1 year. So there were a couple of us. Well, there were only 15 of us in the class. I think even less after the second year. So half of us were supposed to go to China. We filled those forms, and we had to write down what schools and what universities exactly in China, in what places we would like to study. And I had this teacher from northern China, from Harbin, and he said, well, the best place in China is Hangzhou. Yeah, so I wrote down Hangzhou on the first place. I didn't really realize that in different parts of China people speak different dialects, and although they have the common speech, they have, in every place they speak the common speech with a heavy accent,
right.
Especially back then. Now it's much better. If starting from the 80s, people began to travel and move around more and learn Putonghua, the common speech, to a much better level. But back then, heavy accent was like very very common. So actually, that was a good choice. And for some reason, I think the second school, because we were supposed to choose 3. And I chose, the second was the Beijing Language Institute, and the third one I don't really remember. Anyway, I was sent to, which is, I was actually lucky,
right.
That I was not sent to Hangzhou, at least language-wise.
For sure, for sure. Weather-wise, maybe you would have enjoyed it a little bit better. But yeah.
Hard to say,
Yeah.
It's really difficult because, anyway, in 1990, I finally landed in Beijing in early September. I remember this hot, actually, humid. It was humid.
Sticky heat.
I could. Oh, yes. It was, although, Beijing, as you well know, it's rather has a dry climate, but at least, back at that, on that very day, it was very humid. And then I really, I was like, wow, what a great feeling, It was such a different climate and different place, and Chinese everywhere, I could see martial artists around me. All of them were martial artists.
Everyone's a kung fu master in your mind.
Totally, of course. There was no doubt about it. Yeah. So I was amazed, and this is how it all began. This whole China story. I began language studies in Beijing Language Institute, which is now Beijing. I think it's called Beijing Language and Culture University, right, or something like that.
Yeah.
In Haidian.
It's in Haidian. Yeah.
Yes, back then they were calling them 八大学院, 8 big institutes.
Yeah.
Calling them institutes because you could only, the highest education you could get there was bachelor's, undergraduate studies. You couldn't do any masters. Mm-hmm. And then in 1993 they began to organize master courses in those schools, and they changed the names from institutes to universities.
Right.
And I was actually pretty lucky. When I was graduating, I was already graduating from a university, which was a good thing.
How long were you there for?
Looks back. I spent 4 years in Beijing. I studied, and I was supposed to go for 1 year, but I really liked it, and I just, realized the 1 year is absolutely not enough to learn martial arts.
For sure.
And then I extended the studies. I got a scholarship for the second year and the third year. For the fourth year, I was self-supporting myself. Okay. Starting from July 1993 to 1994. I was living in Beijing Language Institute. I was living in Beijing Tuyu Physical Education Institute. Mm-hmm. Working and I returned to Poland in 1994 for a couple of weeks, then go back again to China. So it was like the fourth year was like. Trying to find another way to extend prolong my pain. So in 1994, I finally got a job offer from in Shanghai, a city that I back then I had never been interested in visiting at all. I had no at all, and back then I was kind of unhappy to go there because I thought Beijing was the right place to be and the best place to be. And then
I think it's. Well, I used to have the same idea, and I must say I still have a bias like this because I think the reason is both you and myself were more interested in the cultural side of China. And where is the culture but where the emperor lived? For me it was always Beijing is where the emperor was. Beijing is the seat of the imperial family. Beijing is where the best of the best used to be in regards to culture and all the old ways of China. So in your mind you already have this idea that Shanghai is a big city. It's a big developed port city. It's not going to have the culture that I'm interested in. So maybe that was also part of the reason that you had no interest in Shanghai. I still have this bias. For me, I don't say that other places lack the culture, but for me, Beijing is, Beijing has always been and Gugong has always been, if you want to send somebody one picture to describe Chinese culture, I will send you a picture of Gugong, that's one word, one picture there. So maybe that was part of the reason that you weren't so keen on Shanghai, although it does have its own long, deep, rich, and profound history.
You're very diplomatic. Yeah, well, yeah, I'm kind of sitting on a fence because I really like Beijing, and at the same time I feel kind of, responsible for defending Shanghai's position and advantages. But I don't want to argue. I absolutely agree that if you're really interested in, Beijing now and Beijing, let's say 30 years ago, these are not the same cities, and people are not the same.
Yeah,
and the way of living and the values and what people are interested in is different now than it was back then. And I realized that Beijing. It was a couple of years ago when I was we flew from Poland to Shanghai and we had like 3 days stop in Beijing, and I was just walking around and I could hardly recognize the city. And I'm not a great fan of China's modern development, and it's not because I really like China when it was still a little bit backward country.
Yeah.
It had its nice touch. Of course, China being modern is absolutely, great, and I guess people live better lives. Of course, access to a lot of things that were not, beyond people's even dreams probably back 30 years ago. But Beijing has changed, but it has a lot to offer, and especially in terms of architecture or cultural, Beijing is absolutely a must for somebody who is interested in Chinese culture. And I absolutely very much agree with you that there's more to living in China if you're interested in martial arts than just martial arts. And I would say even more that you really want to understand martial arts, you need to get some background in general Chinese history and culture, because martial arts are a part of it. And if you do research into Chinese martial arts, which is something that I am interested in, sooner or later you have to study history. You have to study the local customs. You have to study local even dialects, or at least get some concepts of local dialects. Otherwise, you will never really get the right understanding of it.
Very true.
And we see it. I understand that what you are doing. You are translating the Xingyi manuscripts, boxing manual. It's not an easy task, but you have practiced for so many years Xingyi. You have lived in China for so many years. You speak the language. This is easier, but I guess there are still difficulties in understanding everything.
There's many difficulties.
Yes. These are texts that were written by people living in this not anymore that much foreign culture to you, but still a different one. And then if trying to understand how people were writing down concepts, or what these written concepts really meant to them back then, requires a lot of knowledge that is far beyond just martial arts. And then so this is something that really should be appreciated to when people like you do this job, and then all those people doing translations. There's a lot of knowledge behind that. And so my respect to you.
Well, no, I mean, you were one of the first people that was doing such things. I mean, I remember looking at your China from Inside website as a window. It wasn't even, you see a lot of, even back then, but I mean, you can find some websites with information about Chinese martial arts, but your website was like a window into China. It wasn't like looking at something that was explaining something about martial arts. You were opening a window that people in the West hadn't had access to, and through that they could see, like, the meat and the bones of the society and the culture of Chinese martial arts. So, I mean, you were doing this a long time ago, and I'd like to ask you about what drove you to start doing that, because it's still up. Your website is still up. It's still a treasure. It's still a wealth of information for people. And I think it's also some of the reason that people realized, wait a minute, there's so much more to this culture of martial arts than I thought there was. It's because of the things that you had there, and some of the interviews with some people that are gone now. They are not with us anymore. And you were one of the first real windows into that. So what made you start doing that?
Well, of course, interest in martial arts. And one thing is that we practice what we practice. We have access to certain teachers, but perhaps this was my fault, something that I shouldn't have done and should not be doing. Instead of, I should have probably focused on studying one system from one teacher, which is, like another issue that perhaps we could talk about later. But I was just interested in different systems, and I watched this videotape of Feng Zhengbao. Feng Zhengbao, the guy who had tapes from Japan about Xini Liuhe. It was I had those friends in Beijing, in Beijing Yuanxue and in Beijing Language Institute, friends from Japan who brought the Japanese Wushu magazine. And they were doing martial arts. I was doing martial arts. We all spoke Chinese, but we communicated. We were in the same class. We were classmates, and they showed me the magazines. I was, wow, there was so much information about Chinese martial arts in those Japanese magazines. And they and then they also brought some tapes. And one of those tapes was with Feng Zhengbao. I was not impressed with his Bagua, but I really liked his Xini Liuhe, which I had, of course, I didn't know much at all. Xini Liuhe back then in Beijing, and even nowadays, it's not really popular. Yeah. There was back then. There was probably in the 90s. There was only Li Xinggong. The old teacher from Sun Guobing's lineage. Right, yes. I think there were a couple of Xingyi teachers back then who were friends with him, and then they were also using some of the techniques of Xini Liuhe. I could see, like this Hubao talk, right. Embraces its head and so on. These are Xini Liuhe movements, not Xingyi movements, although they also exist, but in different form. Anyway, so I saw those tapes. We actually were really good friends with those Japanese guys because they were like really, they were very focused. One of them was into Taiji, and he was mainly into Chen style small frame. And that was interesting. We talk about whatever spies. They were not spies, but they were sent to China by their teachers, martial arts teachers, studied systems. So one of those guys, was very much interested in small frame of Chen style, but he was sent to Beijing to study a big frame from Chen Yu, and actually he was studying from Chen Yu for I think quite some time. Probably Marin knows him. Okay. But in Japan already, doing back his small frame game, style of Chen style. Another guy was who's a very good friend of mine. We still keep in touch, talk often. Was into Xini Liuhe, and he went to Shanxi. He met this guy Guo Ying. I don't think Guo Laochus is still around. I think he passed away. Anyway, he went to Shanxi really early. The third guy was into Tantui, so he was doing this Linqing Tantui. From
okay.
This is now pretty big in Beijing.
Yeah, it's big. I met some of the guys actually last year. There's a guy who teaches north from me, and I'm living in the north of Beijing. He's even more north, and he's I forgot his name actually. I went to visit his place of training. I wouldn't call it a school because it's a community place where people train, and he's very robust. But yeah, it's quite popular.
Sui, I think his name is Sui.
Could be.
He's a little bit overweight guy.
Yes.
Doing, it's a system. It's not just 10.
No, it's a system.
Or 10.
It's a system. Yeah.
Yes, it's a whole complete system. Anyway, but this guy, this friend of mine who was into Xini, he went first to Shanxi. They did some research on Dai style. They did research on Che style. He was the first one who told me about Lü style.
Okay.
Lü, which was very closely related to Li Luoneng's family, and they actually learned at least in Shanxi there was this Guo Ying told them that this is like one of those rare styles in Shanxi, which is and it's probably the most original family style of Li Luoneng, and very close to that. It was like their concept, yeah. So anyway, he was the first one who told me about it, and later on he moved to Henan. He studied at the Technical University of Luoyang, and took the time, the opportunity to travel around in Henan. Made a lot of discoveries regarding different Xini branches in Henan.
Wow.
He really, we talk about this work, research work in the countryside. He spent a lot of time, and sometimes in really poor conditions. Traveling with dirty bags, being almost robbed by people who had these knives that you used to. They were robbing the buses in the countryside, and it was pretty messy back then in Henan. And anyway, so he was traveling, visiting all those mosques and talking to imams and finding old stone tablets with names of people who are known in Xini history. I guess he was one of the best researchers into Xini Liuhe. We know about Huang Xinmin. Huang Xinmin was from I think he was from Jiangsu, from Xizhou. He was the first one who did who discovered Luoyang Xini. Then we have Sun Yemin. Sun Yemin was from Shandong, who did research into Dai style, who was the first one who suggested that if what we see, the wuxing that we see now in Dai style, are actually based on Siba and Gunfa, on the short stick movements. Right. His idea was that it was first as a weapon, and the Siba was the earliest part of the system, and the wuxing were built on the basis of that, because there is stick and there is Siba in Henan, but there's no wuxing. So wuxing was like a later invention. So he was trying to trace the origins of wuxing and to the more original parts of the system in die style, assuming that originally die style was not that different from certain branches of Henan Xinyi. So this Japanese friend of mine, I'm talking about him because he's very influential, and he's very little known in the West.
Yes.
But a lot of people were doing. We have these two other researchers. We have Stephen Yen in New Zealand,
right,
who put a lot of time and investment into digging a lot of the rare branches of Xinyi. There are some other people, but all of them were doing their job not on the level of the Japanese guy.
Really?
And
Wow.
and he made many more discoveries. Well, he discovered like Shui family Xinyi. Shui family, which is mentioned in Baoding's book, and his discoveries actually put a lot of stories about the early origins of Xinyi and Xinyi in different light, because we know this story about Jilunfeng, and then Jilunfeng had a student, Yu, and then Cao Yu had two students. One was Ma Xueli, and the other was Dai Longbang. Then they split. One was Shanxi branch, one was Henan branch, and it's not exactly like this. He through researching Shui family records, he realized that Dai Longbang was still around in 19th century. Probably lived until until 1850s, which is much longer than we read in other sources. And of course, it makes it impossible that he studied from Cao Jiwu.
Right.
There are a lot of interesting things, and then this guy came to many interesting conclusions. Many not final ones, but still the book is still open,
right.
and there's still a lot of work. Hopefully this whole coronavirus is gone soon, so that more research can be done in the countryside of Henan. But anyway, so so this is my interest in Xinyi was also very much influenced by his work and in-depth research into Xinyi and Xinyi.
Was he Feng Zhengbao's student?
No, he was not. He was doing some traditional Japanese martial arts back in Japan.
Okay.
Then he moved to Beijing, and he was doing Zhaobao Taiji, and I think this is the main style that he does right now because of some health issues. But he was doing Luoyang Xinyi Liuhe.
Okay.
But you know very well that if you really want to research a style, you have to practice it.
Of course.
Not that you visit a teacher and you talk to him and you can learn. Once you spend at least couple of months or half a year and study, then you at least know what questions you should ask. Get a lot of information, and sometimes studying a martial arts is for the pure reason of researching it,
right?
Not just of getting improving the skill only. But anyway, so I guess he did study some of those systems. Right. So it's in Beijing. I moved to Shanghai. Shanghai was the city that I did not like, and I still am not really fond of. Gave me the opportunity to have a look at the Shanghai branch of Xinyi Liuhe.
Well, Feng Zhengbao, he's from Shanghai, right? I mean, Feng Zhengbao originated in Shanghai too.
No, he's been living in China, in Japan for many years. I know. Indeed, yes, he's from Shanghai. So I think he's from Xuanzhong's branch
Right.
of Xinyi
No, but
Liuhe.
isn't it interesting though that you were in Beijing, you didn't like Shanghai, but while you were in Beijing, of the videos that you saw from your Japanese friends and other friends, the ones that impressed you were the Xinyi Liuhe videos of Feng Zhengbao, and that got you interested in this style, even if it was subconsciously or consciously, but either way. And then you found your way getting to Shanghai, where Feng Zhengbao is from. So it's kind of interesting how fate works, to be honest.
Sure. Yeah, this is kind of the strange, turn of events that led me to Shanghai, which actually I'm very happy because I met my teacher. I was first of all I was much closer to my Bagua teacher than before. Bagua teacher Di Zhaolong. Because I've been studying Freestyle Bagua since 1991, basically, when I met him for the first time, and then it's been I met him in Wudang actually. I was martial arts is just a part of the general interest in Chinese culture, and Taoism is also important.
Yes.
That, but anyway. Wudang is a place that any martial artist sooner or later goes to and visit. Anyway, so if I was closer to my teacher, who was based in Liang in the southern part of Jiangsu province, and I got introduced to Li Zunsi by his disciple Stephen Yen. Actually, he was the one who introduced. Stephen was very kind to take me to Ma Yueliang, his Taiji teacher. He took me to Wang Zhongfei, also of Imperial Bagua. So it was Stephen was very kind to take me around and visit all those people, and he introduced me to Li Zunsi. And then so I felt like there is another opportunity,
Right.
Beijing was great, but why not do some studies here when I'm in Shanghai? And I was not really that sold out on Xinyi Liuhe until I got a taste of it.
Okay.
I liked Feng Zhengbao was showing. I really liked it, but I thought, back in Beijing, I studied Chen style Taiji, I studied Liang style Bagua, I studied Shang style Xingyi. I did some, I got some taste of Dai style Xingyi, and then because I've just visited Xixian and learned a little bit of that. I was the first. I must say it with some pride. I must admit, I was the first Westerner in Xixian. Doing. Yeah, there was only a group of Japanese before me, the first foreigners who visited there for Daisai Xinyi research reasons. But anyway, I back then I already had I had access to a lot of stuff, and I thought, this is enough. And of course there was the Freestyle Bagua, which was close to Shanghai, but it was not in Shanghai. And I thought, I'm in Shanghai, maybe why not try doing something here, finding a teacher. And I was used to Li Zunsi, and it was I would say it was luck from the first sight.
Yeah,
because I'm now we have 2020. Yeah, it was 1995 when I met him for the first time. I think we began 1995 or 1996, something like that, with a great friend of mine, Jim Councilman. We went together. He's an American writer, and we were just neighbors. One summer, my wife and kid went back to Poland for holidays, and I hear a knock at the door. I open the door, and I see this foreigner I had met some days before. I had seen some days before with bottles of Qingdao beer. And then I said, well, okay. And then, we just said we were drinking the beer and having, great conversation. And then I just said, and this opportunity of studying with Li Zhongsi came up, and then I said, maybe we should go together. Yeah, why don't you see and maybe you like it, And I thought, well, it would be great to have a friend. And
Right.
If go with a friend and perhaps later on practice with a friend, it's always better to have somebody to a friend to share the interest. And he said, why not? And we went there, and it was in People's Park in Shanghai. I hated those people around me watching me. This is the thing that I still hate. but anyway, I was just watching some of the videos from that time, and wow, wow, it's 25 years, and then it's a great memory.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it started in Shanghai, studying with Li Zhongsi, getting slowly, into, getting his trust and being accepted by him, and then getting his trust was easier than getting accepted or recognized by his other students.
Right.
Not many of them are that really happy, seeing foreigners studying the stuff and so on. Especially that all of them were Hui Chinese, the
Muslims.
Muslims, and they have they are a family already in a certain way, pretty close family, and quite orthodox and not that open to outsiders. Yeah. Although in Shanghai, they are not that conservative. They are more open anyway. But still, being open on the in terms of being nice and kind to guests is one thing. Yes. But being open, sharing knowledge, and saying, well, this I don't know, this I don't understand, but this is good that I'm happy to share with you. This is something different. Right, right. So there are different levels of being accepted into that, and I think this was one of the best things that happened to me in China in terms of martial arts, meeting that family and getting accepted into that family. I'm just talking about getting accepted into the family in terms of, having great friends that I can always rely on. Yes. And people treat you like one of their own, and not somebody, not an outsider. I guess because of Chinese culture, you are supposed to be kind and polite too. It's a different thing.
Right, yeah, exactly so. Did your neighbor continue to practice with you?
You mean Jim?
Well, I don't know his name. The guy who you said you went together and he brought Qingdao beer to your home. Did he continue to practice? Does he still practice? Do you still keep in contact with him?
Yes, absolutely. I believe, Jim is still keeping on as much as he can.
Great.
He's back in the days already. He's a bit older than me. But, absolutely. I mean, he left China earlier. He went back with his to the States. I don't remember exactly what year was that. I just remember that we had a parallel party in the small restaurant in Shanghai. We were drinking the rice warmed up with ginger inside. I don't know how many bottles, but when I came back, I was pretty drunk, and my wife was so unhappy because this was the New Year's Day, and she was unhappy that I spent New Year's Day with Jim. But this was our farewell party. It was the day we said goodbye to each other, and he was going back to the States. But we met a couple of years again here in Poznan. Jim actually released a book with his notes that he took when we were studying with Li Zhongsi,
Wow.
which this is something really great, because this is I don't think anybody has done it, at least in this lineage of Li Zhongsi. There are some videotapes of his, some movies, short clips that you can see on YouTube, but there's no such detailed description of how you practice the movements, how you apply them, how you change in applications according to how your opponent behaves. This is Jim, because Jim's a professional writer, so he was taking all those notes and he compiled them into a book. And I must admit, I saw that, when I saw the book, I still have it here. I took all the precious, the most important things that I consider, the most treasured ones from Shanghai. All my notes, Taoist notes and books by another teacher of mine, some other books, and Jim's book was also among those limited number of books that I took from Shanghai when I was returning
to Poland.
Yes, to Poland.
What is the name of that book, and what is Jim's surname?
The Councilman, J.J. Councilman, and the title of the book is, I'm looking at it right now, 10 Animals Kung Fu, 心理六合拳.
Okay. I've seen it. I actually recall it. I've seen it. I haven't read it, but now that you've mentioned it, I'd like to read it. So I think I will get it and read it.
It was, I'm looking. I have also some notes that I was taking when I was studying with Li Zhongsi, but not on the level of what Jim did. Yeah, this is much better. He's a professional writer, so it makes.
You interviewed my teacher. You interviewed Di Guoyong, and maybe, I don't know if you know, but actually that's one of his things. He's a meticulous note keeper. He's a I don't know how to explain this guy, because he came from a peasant, poor background. He was born in Hebei, and his father was born at the end. He was alive before the end of the Qing dynasty. His father, so he was born rather late. What we call in the West today, he was the accident child, obviously, because his oldest brother is almost 3 decades older than him. He's gone, but he went through a basic education. He didn't have a university degree, but he is a perpetual scholar. He's always learning, always reading, always taking notes. He's written a diary his whole life, every day. He has all his diaries, and that is a habit that I got from him, is that I keep training diaries, and when I was training with him, when he's in Australia now, but when I'm with him, I carry a notebook, and if there's anything, I make notes, and I have many notebooks full of notes from training with him, and his habits that he had in his life, I picked up too, in terms of when I read books, I take notes out of them, and I take notes all the time. When I have a question that I want to ask him that's just popped in my head, I write it down and then I ask him. So it's a good habit, actually. It's one way to really understand what you understand, but also it's a good thing that you can look back at to see how you've developed.
You can see actually how your own understanding, what questions you had back at the time, and now you look at them and you see, wow, I didn't realize I was that meticulous about it, and or now you know that there was some aspect, because things change. Some things get, once you get certain skill, you often forget about the way how it happened to you, how you develop them, and then you forget about those questions. You forget those basic questions, yes. Many of them, and when you study, there are so many details being shared, and it is important to write them down. So Dilaus, when you read his books, actually, I think Andrea also did a great contribution
Yes.
to martial community by translating them, because these are probably the best books on Xingyi that one can get and really follow and learn a lot from. Dean Laoshi, I can see, how he analyzes all those things. How when I had this I was interviewing him, I was amazed by his ability to put all those knowledge in a broader light. Not just focus on details, but being able to put them in this general concepts or levels, which not many teachers are actually able to do. It's also, it's a matter of skill, but it's not only just a matter of skill. It's also a matter of how you organize your system, how you view your whole system, not only just part of your own private road, because we have this frame, but everybody has his own personal path that he goes, but being able to look at yourself, look at at your students, and see how they develop, how they practice, and then put them in this bigger picture. It's not that everybody can do that.
Exactly.
And Di Laoshi absolutely, he's the one. So that's why his books are also very, very nice. And the interview, I think the interview was nice as well.
It was great.
I was very happy.
It was a really good interview. But all of your interviews were very good. I mean, there was always a wealth of knowledge there. The people you were interviewing were deep practitioners. The questions and the information that was coming back from your questions was great. Your supplemental information that you added always, that was in respect to whatever the questions and the answers were relating to, that might not have been clear to the general reader, that was always a wealth of knowledge. So that was great too. I mean, your methodology is also very good and you employed it a long time ago. So it was always a great benefit to the international Chinese martial arts community.
Thank you. That's very nice to hear.
Did you
Good to hear.
You mentioned that when you were in Beijing, you were studying some various styles, or you did some Liang style as well. Now you met your teacher and you started doing Shi style Bagua, which you still practice today. So would you say your main styles that you focus are your style of Xini Liuhe and Shi style Bagua? Are these your core practice?
Yes, I think this. I think so. Absolutely Shi style and Xini Liuhe. Of course, I do some Xingyi just to review the material that I have studied. I do Dai style. Also, within the limited time I have. But like final system that I would say I was studying seriously was He Tongbei.
Okay.
In Shanghai. That was because after Li Laoshi passed away, I was, as I mentioned, I was within this Hui family of Li Laoshi's disciples, and if one of them said, you are a tall guy, maybe I know a teacher that you should meet, and he mentioned that, and then we didn't really. We met later on. We met also a couple of times, but I forgot about it, and he didn't mention that thing anymore. Then I heard about this Tongbei Wu or Xiao Wu, that was one of the better fighters in Shanghai. Then I heard about Qian Zhaohong. I heard of him in a strange way because of some foreign students that he was teaching, and because of Guo Gumin, Xu Gumin, Xu Gumin. No.
I was like, how's the connection to Guo Gumin? Now we're going way back.
古名
Okay.
yeah, 徐古明 国古名 徐古明 Xu Guoming is actually, his name is better known as George Xu.
Oh.
He wrote a book in Chinese on Henan Xi Liu He, and he was very much to what Yu Hualong taught him from Shanghai, and then he met Qian Zhaohong, and he called him Chainsaw Qian Zhaohong because of how Qian Zhaohong was teaching, and then I that both Tongbei Wu and Qian Zhaohong were actually students of the same Tongbei teacher, and I learned about it later after finally it took half a year for my older brother, my Shishong, to talk the Tongbei teacher to accept me as a visitor. So he agreed to me. This Tongbei teacher, Bao Guanliang, was he was one of those like everybody heard of him, but few have really met him, and even less people really saw him doing anything. But he had certain fame in Shanghai, and it was said, if you're really into Tongbei, he is the person to meet. And so finally, I managed to visit him. We had a conversation. He was asking questions. I was replying, and so on. We talked about I think this guy is he mentioned a book, 科学内功拳, and I said, oh, this is a book by Zhang Naiqi, and he was surprised. And I think one of the reasons, this foreigner knows a little bit of what I'm talking about. Zhang Naiqi was one of those guys, because the teacher of mine, he was very much influenced by writings of those people in Shanghai in the 20s and the 30s, who were trying to explain concepts of Chinese martial arts in terms of Western physiology and also psychology, physiology mainly. Shanghai was the place back then. We had this Chen Yingning, this famous Taoist scholar, who was trying to finally establish scientific methods to research Taoist internal alchemy. And so there were people who had decent Western education, and still thought a lot of treasures that the Chinese culture had could be very well applied in modern society, and could be explained in using Western science and terms. Right. And Zhang Naiqi, so of course, we know about Tang Hao, we know about Gu Liuxin, those guys. They were also very much influenced by Western thinking, Western, critical thinking. Not just saying, Zhang Sanfeng created Tai Chi, and then UFA was the creator of Xini or Xini. No, he said, not, maybe not. Then he was trying to prove it.
Yeah, then he wrote Shaolin Wudang Kao, and he started doing all the research.
It doesn't really matter if he was right or wrong, but at least he tried his best, and all those guys were trying to do their best, and well, of course, then politics got involved, and Tang Hao, met a strong opposition from later on, from certain people also in Shanghai, especially in terms of explaining the idea of Chansi and Chousi in Tai Chi, and there was some. Well, we know that Li Tianji was also involved in those disputes, and who was more powerful in the 50s. He's promoted. So if I was sports department director, and somebody else was just amateur practitioner, of course, my word and decision was final. So if I say Chen style was created by Chen Zhangxin. Well,
It was.
this is,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah, that's what they'll
final
say.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know that. Anyway, mm, so the Hubei teacher, when we had this conversation and about this, he was very much very talking in high terms about of Sun Tsunzhou, Sun Lutang's son. Apparently, Sun Tsunzhou was very skillful and very powerful and very respected in Shanghai, in old Shanghai. Of course, there's another cultural thing that you have certain systems are being promoted or taught within certain groups of society. So we have Xinyi, which was basically taught by the poorest people,
Right.
to all mainly poor people. Huis who came to Shanghai were working as they were physical workers. Then you have those Taiji guys who are mainly intellectuals. Many of them were intellectuals. Many students of Mujo were from high class, you can say, from high. Then you have Tungbei, which was taught within the Shanghai gangs. And I'm not talking about gangs as bandits, but I'm talking about people who are actually arranging certain charity activities, taking part in political life. People who are you must have heard about of Du Yuesheng and Huan Jinrong,
Yes.
who were like two bosses of those gangs in Shanghai. They were not bandits
Yeah, it's kind of like
just
what we
robbing.
have now with a lot of Chinese business communities in overseas countries, where they have like Yuegang Ao. It's a grouping of Macau, Hong Kong, and Guangdong businessmen, and they also get together and they have an association and they do charity work and they do cultural things and these kind of things. You have the Fujian Association also and things like that.
Well, I think probably with the exception, or maybe this is also the case, that they were also involved in some illegal activities.
Yeah, but that comes naturally. Always when they get, there's no other reason to get together.
Sex and drugs and rock and roll, yeah, perhaps. Yeah, well, I guess true, but I just wanted to clarify and thank you for this info. It's actually it's a good comparison to those groups of business people, associations of business people everywhere in China nowadays and overseas. So anyway, so that Tungbei was Zheng Heshan was Bao Laoshi's teacher, and Zheng Heshan was a member of Qingbang,
Okay.
the Green
Yeah.
the Green gang.
The Green Gang, yeah.
Yeah, so he was quite high-ranking officer within the gang. So that was like a different. So you can imagine what happened after China was liberated. Yeah, the gangs. We know that you went back, escaped to Hong Kong, where he passed away. The gang was of course, well, some people went back to Hong Kong overseas. Some were left. Some were persecuted, obviously, for there were criminal charges against them.
Right.
So if Bao Laoshi was like keeping low profile, teaching very few students. So anyway, I was accepted by him.
Very
so
good.
Tungbei, along with Shis and Yanan Xinyi Liuhe, were the main systems that I practice. I should also mention my Taiji teacher, because Taiji was one of the styles that I studied also, beginning from Chen style in Beijing. Then I traveled to Henan. In 1992, I went to Henan to Wenxian to see this meeting, Wenxian competition. I met Chen Xiaowang there. No, it was not in 1992. It was in 1993, the next year. Two of all those guys, famous guys. But I also there were these two Hong Kong guys staying in the room next to mine. And one evening after dinner, there were no activities anymore, and they knocked at my door. We stayed in the same hotel. And they knocked at my door, and they said, "Would you like to see some other Taiji than the one that is being demonstrated?" Yes, well, why not?
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. So we went to this, to the outside. There was no there was like this it was outside the hotel. We went there together. There were a lot of quite a lot of Chinese people, and they were doing some really unimpressive Taiji, I would say.
Okay.
Quite high stances and slow movements, and it was when you look at Chen style, it's impressive. It can be really beautiful. You can there's a thin line between Chen style and performing arts, I would say. In many cases, especially when we talk about demonstrations where people often, for the reason, they do it on purpose. They change what they do usually just to appeal to the public,
visual effect
and the judges. Exactly. So, anyways, those guys were actually obviously, not the gang involved in doing demonstrations. What they did was very unimpressive until it came to pushing hands, and this is what I was really impressed with. And what was really impressing me was this guy landing on this concrete ground, on this concrete floor, hitting this concrete with his head.
Oh no!
With his back. Like you could hear this ugly sound of human body hitting this concrete with speed and power. So obviously the teacher was not this kind of a polite and nice touchy teacher.
Yeah.
And the student obviously didn't know how to protect himself and how to land, and which was both impressive and disturbing. Yeah. But still, that was my first. That was the first time I saw Zhaobao small frame in action.
Okay.
And the next day, I was invited to Zhaobao town. I was even asked to give a speech, which I gave a speech in my broken Chinese, and the whole we had this meeting was in a village cinema or town cinema, but Zhaobao town was more like a village.
Yeah.
And so packed, and nobody was listening. Like it's different now in China, I guess, but back then, when there's a meeting, it's not official meeting, then everybody talks and has, fun and so on. It's not opera. It's not like everybody's watching the opera and saying no word because everybody keeps quiet, and just enjoys the opera. People talk and you know whatever, sip tea and laugh and have fun. And that was anyway. So they were giving demonstrations of. On the next evening was not just small frame. There was also big frame, different frames from Zhaobao.
Okay.
It was 1993, a hot evening in September, I remember, and I was very impressed by by the village kung fu that I saw there. And yeah, well, with time, I just the concept. What is interesting there, who is good there, and then you got some taste in Weijian, in Java and Weijian. Then I found this teacher in Xi'an, who I was told was one of the best, if not the best, student of Zheng Wuqing. Zheng Wuqing was well, that's a whole another story. Anyway, so this is a rare branch of Taiji.
Right.
Anyway, so I did studies in Zhaobao and on and off, and then when I was doing in Shanghai and in style, I was not really that much involved in Zhaobao until I went to visit my teacher in 2006 again, and we met actually in Wudang first in 2005. And then I began to visit him every year in Xi'an and study his frame. He was not teaching a small frame at that time anymore. He was teaching even a more compact frame, which is called Changjia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Chang means 继承的长, so like a frame of inheritance.
Okay.
Which is... well, this study actually gave me a lot of insight into internal mechanics of what is really internal in internal martial arts. Yeah, it's not about qi and all those magical whatever stuff. It's more about how your skeleton, how your bones, how you coordinate everything, the angles to work most efficient and relaxed way.
Right.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah.
Wow. So those are your styles, and you still practice all of them up until today? I mean, those are the ones that you focus on.
Yeah. Of course, I don't, the good thing about Bagua and Jinyohe and Tungbei is that you don't really practice routines. You have like single movements.
Yes.
So you don't have to do a lot of routine work. It's just focus on certain movements. And, it's like you're supposed to develop certain body qualities. Yeah. And once you have them, you can even practice one movement and still work on all of them.
Yes, that's very true.
And you are.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, honestly, if I look at my, for example, Liang style that I learned from my teacher, the curriculum has a lot of content. But the key and the core of it is, 定式八掌, 老八掌, 连环掌. I would say those are in terms of your empty hand. That inside of these three is everything, and then anything that comes after that is pieces from that. Maybe there's a little bit of difference, maybe a little bit extra, maybe it's a different focus, but those three core you can find most of the content. So it's if you're practicing those three every day, in general you're going to be developing most of what needs to be developing. And then there's other things, of course, like Ba Mian Zhang and Liu Shi Si Shou. Liu Shi Si Shou is great because it's focused on application, the 64 hands. But it's hard to, if I want to try review everything or try to it will take hours. I mean, if I just do 丁式八掌, 老八掌, and 连环掌, it's 2 hours of my time just to do that. And then if I want to focus on some of the other key points, it's a few hours more. So it's very hard to, if it was a system that you had a lot of routines in, there just isn't enough time in the day to do it. But if you, like you said, the key and the core, you can actually develop. Just with one movement, you can work on the key points. So within 丁式 and 老八掌, you can actually work on the key points anyway. So yeah, and with 新一拳, as you know, I mean, 河北新一拳, same thing. We do line drills up and down. So it's that's the core. You have to do that. The taolu is not really the main point, actually.
Obviously, I mean, many of those routines are more like, you can say dictionaries. Yeah, you just put all that together. These techniques, in many cases, are not like really original ones. Everybody adds some stuff, something that I like this one. This one really works for me. Writing, I have this one technique that I can basically deal with everybody. Different setup, but at the end of the day, it's just this one thing that I put people down. Yeah, so I just add it and then compile routines and so on. But in daily practice, it's just practice of individuals' routines, individual movements, single movements. 丁式巴掌, 老巴掌, we call them 巴木掌, 8 mother hands, palms, yes, palms, and if the rest is like, in Shista we say we have 巴木掌, 8 mother palms, and then the next, each one has 7, we call them 小掌, like small, or 三掌, small palms or 3 palms that are basic variations of the main concept, but for different, let's say, different environments or different situations. It's basically like it's all rooted in this one. The 7 are based on this
main one,
mother palm, main mujang. So of course, it's like in studying and practicing martial arts, it's a process. You go from basics, then you learn those movements, and then you want more, and you go through all of them, and you practice different directions, different distances, different speeds, and then after some years, you realize that basics are the thing. Basics are important, but the basics that you practice for, let's say, 10 or 15 years are not the same basics that you were beginning your practice with,
right?
Because your muscles, your reflexes, your tendons, your whole body is already trained in a certain way. So these basics are already, they carry this whole experience and skills that you have developed. So it's like perhaps if you only do basics without any other stuff, they would be more like not that complete in terms of the and when I guess it depends how you are being taught, but my experience is that it's good to go through all those different variations and movements and then return to basics, and then you see that those, you can basically see everything in those basic movements, which and then you see clearly the value of focusing on basics. You don't need much more in it at all.
Yeah, very true, very true. You know what also happened with me when I mean many years ago, after training with Master D's, and I was focusing on Xingyi, and after some time he said, okay, it's time to start with a spear. And when I started with, and we use a big spear, we don't use a small spear, and he started with just, again, basic movements, not basic techniques, but basic movements of spear. body movements and things like that. And when I started doing that, after some time, something just went, I just had like a moment of enlightenment that I found the root of the 5 elements in the spear, mechanics. And then everything, when I went back to the 5 elements, I was finding the spear inside my bare hand. It was, and this is similar to what you were saying, like you learn the variations and then you go back to the basics and you see the variations in the basics too. And you see the root of the variations in the basics. So that happened to me with spear for Xingyi, and of course also with the other techniques, but it's very interesting how these things connect.
Very true. There's of course there's a question that, have you found, you took the spear and you already had this training of wuxing, of training of 5 elements behind your belt. So there's no doubt that you are doing spear using these certain skills and techniques and powers that you already had a good grasp of, and spear enhance them. And then when you return back to wuxing, you 5 elements, you use the spear experience. But it's like a tricky thing because I think it boils down to the situation that basically anything you do, to some extent, develops your skill. So when we talk about working in the fields, if they do Taiji, they always, unintentionally, subconsciously, they will use certain Taiji ideas
yes.
in their daily work. The same, with Xingyi, sometimes you don't realize there's a chair standing in the middle of the room and you walk around, you have to go from this room to the another one, and there's this chair in the middle, and you just go around it in a very, actually in a trained way, this is so, this is like the daily, I would say the daily, when the daily activities, the normal activities become a part of your practice, and it's not because you want them to be, because there's no difference between practice and normal behavior, and there's no distinction. It's one. Well, becomes one.
It could be. I've always thought about this. That very philosophical, deep discussion about the 3 levels of Xingyi Quan. Ming, An, Hua. Apparent force and hidden force, and then transformed force, and then people are trying to explain, how does apparent force differ from hidden force, and how does hidden force differ from transformed force, and what does the movement look like? And I always had this subconscious feeling that Hua, which is transformed, is you as a human being. At the end of it, you're transformed. You're like you've just said, the skills and the abilities that you've developed become manifested in everything you do in your daily life without even thinking about them. You're doing them. So, it is quite a relevant point.
When we talk about this Liu He, we talk about this Nei Zhang He, Bai Zhang He, about this Qi and Xin, and it's basically boils down to the coordination of your body, unconscious actually behavior that is can be response to certain attack, or can be just whatever you do every day. You don't think about a knife and fork and you eat something, or you take a spoon and you eat a soup. You don't even think, but your whole body, perhaps how you sit on the chair, how you lift this spoon with soup. It's already a result of focused training, but at this point it's not conscious, and it's but the whole physical and mental mechanism is already there.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. That's very true. That's very true. Your posts over the last few years on Facebook, where you have written about your times when you go to visit some relevant places regarding old Taoist writers, or places of meaning that have been forgotten, or environments or natural places that had been written about, and your writing that you've been doing on these pieces that you share, they've always been very beautiful, they've been very deep, they've been very profound. Is that something that you are working towards now? Are you looking to possibly write something and release something with all of those experiences and travels that you did to these places that you're because you also mentioned, you're interested in Taoism and apart from Chinese martial arts, and that's something you've also been researching and following. So is that something that you're looking to do?
Well, first of all, thanks for kind words about comments about my writing or my attempts.
No, they're great.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. That's very nice. And I'm. It is indeed a part of my interest in Chinese culture. What we've been talking about, China is not coming to China. Maybe perhaps was just for martial arts, but it's not only arts anymore. And to me, Taoism was very important. One of the reasons actually that I should mention it here, that I came to China after I have kind of read Tao Te Ching and Lao Tzu. The is probably the breakthrough point was when I met my teacher, my Taoist teacher in White Cloud Temple in 1993. It's a long story, but anyway, these years, we live in Shanghai, which is a big city, 25 million people, crowded, always in rush, always in, there's a pressure, there's the whole speed of life and work is so overwhelming. We can hardly have time to relax. And for this reason, I always we go together with the family to the countryside, and it's good to have a reason, to go to an interesting place. And to me, it's not ocean, whatever, beaches, and all such places. It's places which have a certain carry certain importance for Chinese history. And one of those first places that and to me probably one of the dearest places is are Tiantai Mountains in Zhejiang, which is also a story of its own, starting from visiting there in 1995 and taking 3 rolls of photos and getting those rolls destroyed by laboratory in Shanghai, which was supposed to develop them, and it was supposed to be one-time trip to that place, just to go there, visit, see what's important, and then just go somewhere else. And then I said, well, I have to again to take photos again, and then we began to discover a lot of things, and then it's probably how it started, and then I expanded it to become a certain project of look forgotten places, and there are so many of those places in China related to important people in the history of Chinese Taoism and Buddhism that nobody really spends time and effort to find and to research. Like probably one of the most interesting examples would be finding the place where woman Hui Kai Song Dynasty Buddhist monk was meditating at the foot of Tianmu Mountains in northern Zhejiang, east of west of Hangzhou. Woman Huikai is famous for his woman Guan, the collection of koans.
Yes.
Is very famous in Japan. And woman Huikai is also famous for having a Japanese disciple who brought chiba, bamboo flute, to Japan, who was chiba, of course, was famous in Japan before that, but he brought the Buddhist way of playing the instrument to Japan. Lost in China, and then everybody knows that woman Huikai was in Hangzhou. There's Huanglongdong, the Yellow Dragon's cave in Hangzhou, but if few remember and realize that he also lived at the foot of Tianmu Mountains. And I spent quite some time there, starting before I went there. Nowadays I first collect documents, usually local gazetteers from Ming, Qing. If there are earlier ones, I also try to find the earlier ones, temple chronicles, and then I contact local researchers, ask for help. But in case of women's place, everybody knew where it was until I asked. Then nobody could give me any information, and they said, you just go there and ask people, and they know, those people who live there, those Poles living in the villages. I went there, I was asking around, and everybody has different opinion and different, he was pointing at different places, and then nobody knows. And then I called those researchers again, and they said, actually, I must admit that I have never been there.
Oh, no.
And yes, so I was at the beginning of everything, and I said, I said to myself, let's try to find the place, and I met to get some there's Tianmu Shanzhi, the Chronicles of Tianmu Mountain, and there are two versions of it. The later one, we had a very short information about the place with a description, and then I finally found an earlier one which had more detailed information. And I was just walking there around along those trails and trying to compare the description in those materials with the surrounding natural environment and surroundings. And then I finally found it.
Wow.
So I was really, really happy, because it's a long story. It's something that's has to be written down, probably, the whole process of me getting lost in those mountains, being caught by boat traps, and there was some little danger involved as well. But at the end of the day, I found it, and I was very happy. So there are so many places described in all those old gazetteers. We went to Jinyang. Everybody goes to Fujian. Most people go to Fujian, to Hui Mountains, which are very beautiful, famous for Hui rock tea, and for Taoist and Buddhist.
Yeah, I've been there too.
Heritage.
I've been there too.
Oh. But there is a small town called Jinyang, not far from Hui, which is also a very interesting place. With I would say that most people go to Jinyang because of Jiko, which is famous for Jianzhan, the tea bowls, tea cups made mainly during Song Dynasty. But there's a very rich Taoist culture there. There are sacred mountains. I spent many Oh, I don't know how many attempts to find one of those. There are like grotto heavens in
Okay,
Taoism.
yeah,
The
yeah.
big ones, and auspicious places. And one of those auspicious places is in Jinyang, but nobody really knows where exactly. So I was spending a lot of time trying to find it, finding other places, on the way, meeting a lot of people, which was, and this is really interesting because, you have a certain goal, and instead of you perhaps never really achieve it. But on the way to that goal, you meet a lot of interesting people. You learn so much. You achieve something that you have never really had in mind, which is about life. Yeah, you set yourself goals, but instead of probably sometimes getting frustrated by not achieving them, it's better to have to enjoy everything else that comes on the
Very
way.
true. And I mean, that's, I think, part of fate and destiny. These travels and these stories, are you going to compile them and write them and release them as a book? Is there any plans for that?
Oh yeah, that's a plan. That's been a plan for many years now.
Well, I think you should do it. I mean, and,
Yeah.
and I'll pre-order the first copy, but I really think you should do it. I've read a lot of Red Pine or Bill Porter, and I've read some of his writings as well as his translation. What was that book that he wrote? I think it was called Road to Heaven,
Yes, yes. Oh
and
yes. That's a
it's a
classic.
great book. And your writing actually reminded me a little bit of that book, and that book is one of my favorite books of all time. So I really hope you get this project. Of course, it's not about rushing it because then it won't have the quality that you want. But I'm looking forward to it when it's ready, whenever that is.
Thank you. Thank you. I keep it in mind, I should, there are so many new things coming. There are so many there's so much new information, and I would like to explore, see and learn. And there is never enough time to sit down, look back, and compile uh, all those things that have already happened into a book. Most of those, when regarding those writings on Facebook, those short texts, it's sometimes like, I look through those photos. I download photos from my card. I just transfer them to the computer, and I just look at some of them, and I just remember this moment, this situation, and write it down. So it's also a matter, I guess, of creation of the right mood. I'm not a professional writer. I just cannot write because I'm supposed to write. I just write when I feel that it's when the moment comes. Yeah.
Well, that's a writer. No one's a professional writer until they've written a few times. So it has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So,
True. True.
and are you planning? I
Yeah.
mean, I don't want to assume about your retirement age, but are you planning on retiring and staying in China? Or are you planning on returning to Poland, or do you not have a plan? Are you just taking it as the path takes you?
With China, it's not that you can really retire in China. I guess with you and having Chinese family, it's a different situation. Uh, to me, we can be in China as long as we are allowed to, and are issued visas
Of
for staying
course.
in China. Once visa, we cannot stay there any longer. So that's why staying in China is always feels temporary. It doesn't feel like, oh, this is the place that I can retire to, because because of the regulations that China has, and requirements. And home is home.
Yeah.
Poland is my home. This is where I was born, and this is where I feel really comfortable. I feel I miss China, and I like China. And absolutely, this is the place that I happy that I had this opportunity to live for so long. But I'm afraid, I don't think I will retire any time. Because retirement means like, I don't know, watching TV and doing nothing.
We're getting a small taste of it right now with this lockdown quarantine.
Maybe this is a good lesson, that retirement is not actually the best way of living the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's better to stay active and do the things you love. But yes, I guess sooner we'll move somewhere. We'll move back to Poland. We'll live in Poland. I mean, this is right now we're in Poland because of the whole situation, and we cannot go back to China because all international flights have been canceled. But sooner or later we'll go back to China. We'll stay for I don't know how long it will be, as long as it's possible, probably, and then we'll the plan is to return back to Poland and go to China, just for fun, to learn more, to visit more places, to visit friends again. Have beer with Byron.
Good.
Finally.
Yeah. Good. That sounds good. Well, we're going on to 2.5 hours, and it's been really great. I want to just try close it because I don't want to take your whole day away from you. But let me close with this: that in my times that I went to Poland, for me, I've always enjoyed Poland and the Polish people. The attitude of the Polish people from a martial arts point of view. Most of the people that I met in my field were martial artists from Poland, and they've always been dedicated, working and great martial artists, but they've been very good people as well. But you, I think, are probably my most favorite Polish person, and you're a great representative and ambassador for Chinese martial arts. You did a lot in times and in a pioneering way that people hadn't come before and you had done. You've opened a window into China with your website, and for me at least, it was always a great asset to have what you did out there. So thank you for all of that, and thank you for giving me this time to talk a little bit about your story. I'm sure there's a lot more to it, but I think some people have some interesting insights from this.
Thank you, Byron. My pleasure, and I feel honored to have this opportunity to talk to you. And the beer is on me. Once we meet, the beer is on me.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so keep safe there. Keep in touch, and thank you once again. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. Same to you. Stay healthy. It's a difficult time. Hopefully, we'll be over with this very soon, and we'll be back doing the things we love.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. Okay, you have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, Byron.